way that I use to start this kind of job is by drawing silhouettes. So what I would do is usually draw 2 or 3 silhouettes, and then have the client decide. Also, what I just wanted to talk about for a second is that this video is sped up 5 times. So overall, it took me 20 something hours to do the whole painting. It was spread over 3 4 days. The reason I'm speeding it up is like I believe it's really incredibly boring to look at somebody at real painting speed, and I don't want to inflict that on you guys. Also, because I just can't talk about this for 20 hours. I would just kill myself in the process. So in 4 hours, I think I'll have it's enough time, and also things are going fast enough on the screen that I can talk about it logically and connect things together and stuff like that. So that's it. Because anyway, the techniques that I'm using, the painting and drawing, I mean, it's nothing special. It's just regular drawing and painting. So I don't think it's really that important to look at. What's more important is the concept behind it and the thinking and the process behind it. So that being said, let's go back to the drawing part. So what I'm doing here basically is I start with the silhouette, and what I've done before actually drawing is that I've tried to imagine it in my head. I was like trying to force myself. If I'm really bad at this. I'm definitely no Kim Jong-ji. I can't really visualize a whole design in my head down to every detail. I just don't know how he does it. So but I still tried in terms of like silhouette and like especially how I would find the best contrast to showcase what I wanted to showcase. And in this case, and I'm starting to do it now, it's very simple. It's like because the cat is white or gray, well, there you go. I have a very strong very simple, very strong value patterns to start with, which is 2 values. Like the armor parts will be black, and then the cat part or fur part will be white. And so, starting with that idea in mind, I can already have an idea of how to compose shapes together. Because at the end of the day, this is the only really goal of a painting, is to sort of find an arrangement of shapes of various values that are compelling to the human eye, basically. Not only in terms of what they depict, and actually what they depict is actually secondary. The most important part is the sort of way a shape arrangement can be pleasing to the human eye for some reason, because of the way our brain is built and how we react to certain proportions and certain mathematical distribution and stuff like that, which I couldn't really explain. I have experience from a visual design perspective. I mean, you've heard of the rule of thirds and stuff like that, and the golden number and stuff like that. At the end of the day, even knowing those things will not make you a good painter. You just have to practice and to design this kind of arrangement as much as possible by yourself to be able to develop the all-seeing eye, or the third eye, or the feeling, or the I don't know, you call it some bullshit name, like some esoterical names that you can give it that would make sense to you. But it's basically something you acquire. It's like taste in wine or cheese or snails or insects or something. It's an acquired taste that comes with practice. Really, there's nothing else. It's the reason why as kids we, for example, like primary colors, and then as we grow up and get more experienced and more accustomed to those colors, then we start liking secondary and tertiary colors and something more muted, more desaturated, more subtle. It's the same thing here. When you're gonna start, you're gonna be doing like very blunt things and very simple things, and the more you practice, the more you taste refine, and the more you want to do something that's more subtle, I guess. Not exactly sure it works, but that from my own self-assessment is pretty much how it happened, I guess. So after I kind of again, like I do a rough, it's like a rough first pass, like you know how it works. And like I was saying, you test, refine along the way. At this point, you know, you reach different stage where it feels okay to move on to the next stage or something like that. But then you know it's not okay, and in a few hours you'll be refining every part of that, as you see me doing. I'm refining. It's always a, like I was saying, you become wiser along the way, and if you're honest enough, and you never really get satisfied by your own thing until the very 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 end, then you'll be improving it. um, right now, like again, the only thing I'm trying to do here is to solve 2D, very simple two value composition. The reason I'm doing that is that it's like a house foundation and stuff like that, the usual metaphor of the house foundation. If the stronger the stronger and the simpler the design at the beginning, the better the work will be at the end when you start adding all the details and stuff like that. And the other way around, if it's weak from the start, nothing else that you will add will fix that and will make it feel better. And that's one of the mistakes that I was doing a lot at the beginning, is like not spending enough time on this stage I until like the gut feeling is right. Like you, another cliche illustration, gut feeling. It's really hard to explain, except that we have a brain there that is better than our actual brain, and that gives us the intuition and stuff like that, or some bullshit like that. But anyway, what I was doing at the beginning is like I knew this basic design wasn't good, but because I didn't know how to fix it, I was lying to myself and saying, "Oh, it's gonna get better once I had colors or when I start rendering and stuff like that," and it never really did. And once you've spent 40 hours trying to fix something that was flawed from the beginning, then you admit it to yourself and you feel miserable. And whereas if you had spent more time on this stage and try to fix things and not move on from this stage until you really honestly believe that it's all you can do at this point, and you've done all the groundwork, as much groundwork as possible to lay down the strongest foundation possible, then you don't move on. Here you see the kind of only time where I try to fit in the sci-fi sort of design that I was talking about, by trying to make it look like a sort of more space pirate or some bullshit like that. I was just trying to design a mask, but the problem is, I was constantly conflicted with the fact that it would kind of ruin my simple value pattern from the beginning, which is like fur and metal separated as two simple values, and also because it was a lot of little shapes, too many lot of little shapes, and I kind of had the feeling that it wouldn't work in the end. It was just like I couldn't reconciliate the two universe at this point, because they were like for a design to be kind of good and feeling consistent across your whole character, it's kind of like you have to spread, if you start suddenly to use a sort of visual language with shapes on one part of the image. It's kind of important that you spread it around so your character feels consistent and part of the same sort of design principles. And in this case, I don't know, for lack of imagination, probably mostly it's my own shortcoming in terms of being able to imagine something out of that basic idea. But I ended up like playing a lot with it and going back and forth and turning on and off layers for millions of times, like you will see me always do, because I'm trying to compare before after. And again, I'm just trying to have this millisecond sort of feeling, like on and off, on and off. When you see people do that, usually it's like they're trying to get that, to check it with their guts, like, because the problem is like it's not with their gut, but like it's like, you know, your brain, the first thing that your brain is trying to do is find meaning in everything, and find relationships and explain everything. Like every patterns, they sort of try to explain it. It's in one way or another. Your brain is constantly trying to do that. So by switching on and off very rapidly, you're trying to short circuit that process and just get the visual gut feeling. And does it work or does it that? Is it working or is it not? Is it working? Is it not? Is it working? Is it not? Just with your gut feeling, not with your rational thinking brain, but more with your sort of like intuitive, unconscious brain. Because for some reason, it feels like that's where the visual appreciation of something is stored, which is like because when you think about it, when the photons hit your iris or your eyeball or something like that, like the first data transmission, that's at this level that you want to check. You don't want to check past that, nerve systems, and when the information hits the nerves and hits the brain, and when it already has given meanings to things, you want to check on that very first primary data transmission on the iris. And that's the bullshit explanation I give myself, but that's what I think is happening anyway. And so turning it on and off, and that's the same with flipping your image back and forth. Is like you constantly trying to trick your brain into seeing something new, so you can get that fresh feeling. Like I was saying, like when you look at something you worked on month after that, you have a new look, like a stranger, like almost it's not your work. So you get a more honest assessment, I think. So here you see that I'm slowly refining the shapes and adding a third value after I was kind of satisfied with the two value composition, trying to add a third value to start breaking down patterns. Also because I think it in any design it's kind of good to try to have at least 2 or 3 different materials. So in this case, we had from the start fur and black dark metal, and then by adding a third value, I'm kind of introducing a third material, which in this case would be leather, as you can see on the belt part. I didn't end up keeping that. I think this third value will become, instead of leather, it would become gold as a third material. So then we have the 3 material: the fur, the dark metal, and the gold metal, which kind of is the same material, but in terms of value it's not, and in terms of how you treat it, it's not either. Especially the way I'm going to treat some part of the black metal, which be more matte, whereas gold is very very reflective. Here I'm trying to start thinking about shape within shapes. So within the big silhouettes that I was kind of happy with at the time, I'm trying to think of how I'm going to break this down. And again, in terms of abstract 2D shapes, how within each area, each shapes, how I can break it down with other shapes that works within these shapes and work with the whole. It's just like rinse and repeat, or rinse, think, and refine. If I want to describe it more precisely now, it's not like rinse and repeat, but it's more like stop, think, and refine, and then repeat. And here, for example, I'm going back to the issue of not being able to link those shapes together. Like again, you're trying to get a very strong, very simple pattern composition. And if you might have heard that before, but if your dark shapes are connected and all your light value shapes are connected, then on an abstract level, it's a much easier message for your brain to understand and pattern to read. So it becomes more impactful in the way that your brain is able to read that shape very, very quickly. And for some reason, the brain loves that shit. So that's why that's what you're trying to do. It's not like you can change the way people even you yourself look at things and react to things. There's stuff that has been established a long time ago by painters and visual designers before you, and then they found out a lot of things about how the brain reacts to these kind of things. And so it's not because you want it to be different that it's going to be different. So you just have to learn those rules and play by those rules and adapt to them, and that is if you want to, again, describe something in a realistic manner. If you want to do other things, then that's another subject. But in terms of creating something realistic, there's nothing else you can do except learn how reality works and learn how the brain reacts to that and what is pleasing for the eye and what is not. Now, what's happening is that one of the ideas that I started to develop for this guy is that because he's a hunter, and that you can see usually in tribal design, or even, I mean, we still do it today, but like you're trying to absorb the power of the thing you kill or something like that. Like there's a lot of, that's why like people were wearing the skins of, not only for in terms of like warmth and stay warm and stuff like that, when you wear like a bear pelt or wolf pelt or stuff like that. But like, for example, I'm thinking about African tribes or any other tribes that just wear the skin of the animal because it's a symbol of power, because you killed it, and so it sort of like belongs to you and its power belongs to you. So in the same way, I was like trying to think like of everything the cat can kill, and it would like I've implemented that in its own armor design. So that's why I'm starting to like I actually started with another like a cat skull as part of the shoulder pad design, but then you'll see that I'll switch to another animal which is more of a prey for a cat than its own kind. Also here I'm pushing the asymmetrical design as much as possible. It's just another thing that it's another one of those cliche cheap trick, whatever you want to call it, that an asymmetrical design. Again, this is something that's more pleasing for the human eye. So that's what you do. Breaking the silhouette with a lot of little spikes is another way to make it the shape more interesting. And the reason why I'm not doing a line design here, for example, is like because it's something I enjoy a lot, also doing line designs, and I do often. But the problem is in terms of time, and here we're playing against time because I'm trying to make this demonstration as short as possible and as less boring as possible. When I find that doing line drawings, you kind of like, because the line drawing in the end, especially if your final goal is to do realistic rendering, your line drawing is going to be totally useless by the end. So, but when you start doing line drawing, you kind of doing line drawing for line drawing's sake, and you want to do a beautiful line drawing, and so you spend a lot of time refining your lines and stuff like that, especially when you're really suck at it like I do, and in the end you waste a lot of time, even if it's useful for like fleshing out designs within the big shapes that you're designing. First of all, it doesn't help because you don't see things in terms of silhouettes or like plain shapes. You see things in terms of line, and that has sort of like it's kind of deceitful for your judgment on how good a shape is. More often than not, when you translate, when you start filling line drawings with plain shapes, and you find out that what you thought was working is not in terms of silhouette, and so you have to do even more work on top of that. So that's why I kind of stopped doing line drawing for character design, and I mostly use silhouette. Another reason is that in terms of like trying to do as much as possible as early as possible for the later stage, you can really push shape design and silhouette design really far into something that actually looks quite realistic and quite close to what's going to be the final product with very little effort, because because you're working with flat colors. It's very easy to sculpt them and erase or build into them and test things. And if it takes a bit of training, but with enough sort of like mental projection or imagination, you can really, really accurately uh, tell what it's going to look like by the end. And that's a lot of time saved. And on top of that, if you work on layers, a lot of them, like I do, you can then paint within those layers without going over anything else. And so if those shapes that you've already done are kind of final, then you save time. And also you'll see after that when you start putting lighting and colors into them, if you have very accurate base shape, it just looks better right away when you start putting light into them. So that's another thing that is helpful, I find, in like doing less mistakes and work faster. You know, I think right now there's a bit of fidgeting going on. Like you'll see that sometimes I just start nudging on useless stuff or going back and forth and like starting to be a little OCD on my layers, turning on, turning off, because I'm just kind of thinking and testing and double checking with myself if like is it okay to move on or it's not, and it's kind of hard to jump because like I said, you don't want to waste time. You don't want to realize in 4 hours that shit, you actually missed a very important point in your base design. So I'm gonna check and triple check. And also, by the way, like right now it's all happening in a row, but like I usually work in like slice of 2-3 hours and then stop and either switch to another job or wait the day after, just to make sure, because like I said, it's important to step back from it and being able to come back and to assess honestly what you've done the day before or and so the only way to do that is really to step away from it. So up until now it's only one session, I think, but you'll see. Oh, actually no, it's already 2 session. And that's why, see, I'm going back over the mask, or I'm starting to add element and create a different silhouette, or just rethink the design in certain ways because it was just not good enough at the time. That is. And see, I'm gonna again. I'm constantly fighting. I really wanted to have that mask somewhere, but it just doesn't work. And at this point, I'm thinking it might not be the actual design mask, but the base anatomy of the face that I did was kind of wrong, and so it kind of throws off the whole design too. There's something that can happen also, it's like it's another skill to be able to identify the real reason of why something is not working, because it could be, it's either a design or a proportion or a value or colors, right? It's just four or five different things it can be, nothing else. It's not inspiration, it's not I'm not good enough and stuff like that. It's very technical at this point. It's very analytical. So if you're able to, look past your first impression of what's wrong and go actually a layer under, more often than not, you'll find a solution to your problem is in the previous stage that you kind of fucked up. In this case, it was like kind of the positioning or the proportion of the eye and the face in the middle of the global silhouette of the head. So I went and redesigned that a little bit and trying again at different designs. And I think I went to look at references or something like that. Like I tried when I'm stuck, I try to go and be humble and like as much as possible and tell myself, look, I can't come up with it by myself. So I'm going to try to look at what other people have done and try to get inspiration from that as much as possible, because it's like nothing. There's a certain you can go as far as your imagination lets you, and when you reach the limit, that it's good to go and see what other people have done when they face the same problem. Well, just because like you can't work, nobody works in a vacuum, I guess. You have to take inspiration from somewhere. So that's more fidgeting, more trying. Now in this case, trying to solve the groin area, like how am I gonna deal with the junction between the legs and the fur, and should it be covered in armor, or should I just leave the fur and stuff like that. All these design problems that come up along the way that you didn't really plan, but you just adapt on the go. So here's a terrible rendition of a cat's face. It's really hard to. It's very easy to fall into a lion's face. For some reason, the design is very slightly different, but makes all the difference. There's something in the nose or in the proportion of the shape of the eye, the proportion of the cheeks, that it's very easy to fall into lion territory. And I definitely wanted not, because there's something that also was one of the reasons of my choice for this subject matter, is that you often see tigers and sort of big lions and stuff like that as far as fancy character design, but you rarely see an actual cat, and a cat depicted in, anthropomorphic cat, not like a cute exaggerated cat, but a very anthropomorphic and kind of like realistic version of it. And so that's why I was trying to do that. And it's like it's almost like a woman's face. Like it's so subtle, and the structure of it holds on so little that it's really easy to miss. And I'm gonna try at it many times until I feel it worked. And like I showed you in the reference before, of course, I'm looking at those reference while I'm doing that and trying to pinpoint, using those reference, what kind of shapes makes that face, and why I get this feeling. What are the combination of shapes that gives that feeling of majestic elegance and gravity to it, and beauty and stuff like that. And again, it's very subtle. And I think that the thing is, like, much like with a woman's face, you can't. It's very hard to achieve with solid shapes or line drawings and stuff like that. That's why it's it's much more efficient to try to go with soft shapes, soft brushes, and not lines. Because especially with fur, I mean, if you consider the material, it's mainly fluff. There's no solid shapes there. So of course there's bones under the cat's face, so there has to be some odd edges there, some odd volumes, but it's all covered in fur, so the impression that you get is very soft for everything, and very subtle, especially under any kind of light situation. It's going to be very subtle transition between forms. So first of all, you have to understand what kind of forms we're talking about. So you have to look at the cat's skull and everything, and then understand that on top of that there's flesh, and then on top of that there is fur. So it's like the game is to try to understand how that affects the rendition of the material under light. And in this case, it means like actually your brain is doing the work of making sense of that volume with very little information in terms of form of, not very little information. All the information is there, but very subtle informations. And if you go with heavy-handed with big fat brushstrokes, then you of course you miss it. So that's why you have to go in there and refine, like I'm trying to do. Another thing that you've seen me like correct it and destroy it and rebuild it from scratch, like probably 3 or 4 times already. That's another thing that didn't do enough when I was starting up, is like having the courage to just destroy what you've done, just erase it and start over, and you'll see that it's much more. It's time saving to do that as fast as possible. Sometimes you cling on to things that you want to work, but fundamentally, like your gut feeling is like this is garbage. It's not gonna work. I don't know why, but and sometimes you try to fix for hours for nothing. Whereas starting from scratch again, going back to the layer under is a much more efficient way to go about it. And so that's something, but that's something you learn to do as you go along. As you with more experience, more failures brings you that. So now I was kind of happy where that face was, and the emotion was kind of what I wanted, and the feeling of a cat face was kind of what I wanted. So I moved on to other things and tried to bring the tails, for example, and then going back and then raising raising the stakes, and try to improve the rest again, and trying for the gazillion time to fit in that fucking sci-fi mask that just didn't want it to get in. It just wasn't working. Here you see me remove. Actually, that's another thing. It's kind of easy to add. It's always good, and that's why it's fucking fantastic to have layers. Is that you can try and fail and remove and move stuff around, and again, it's just another gut feeling thing. If you check back and forth, and if the feeling is that it's much better before, then that's probably that it is. You've done something wrong. You had it too much. You broke down your big shapes too much. Very important thing to check. Never kind of like stick to what you plan at the beginning and don't break it up too much. Otherwise, you break the feeling again. The feeling. So here, this is where I introduced the beginning of like introducing the animals that the cat kills as part of theme for the armor. So in this case, like a bird skull as a big shoulder pad, and then it's something that didn't stick after, but I was kind of playing with the idea that he actually strapped on dead birds onto his armor as well, for some reason. There's a lot of things that you end up justifying later, but you started with just because the shapes were working better. It was just better purely in terms of shape composition, and then you try to justify that and give them meaning and functionality after that. So it's the same here with the belt. I was just trying to start doing shapes and feeling that it was actually breaking down and connecting those different parts together better, and then try to justify them by like, oh, maybe he has like some prey, some mice that he killed, or some little rodent that he killed attached to his belt thing, and added a layer on the thigh armor pieces. Added another layer which will end up being gold. All this kind of stuff. It's like I was saying, once I was done with the basic layer of silhouette design, then you just raise the stakes and try to improve. Little bird. And constantly trying to play with the composition of light on dark, dark on light, gray on gray, gray on black. Trying to make it as varied as possible, as fun as possible in terms of eyeball entertainment, instead of having just plain boring composition.